This is Lacy Johnson, welcoming you to another episode of Bright Lights, our podcast here where we focus on the positive, overcoming obstacles and achievements in life. And along that line, we bring you people who share their stories of achievement. Uh, this week, to be honest with you, and I always want to be honest with you, we have a retake. We had some technical difficulties with Mr. Felton Smith, who's our guest tonight. And you may recall that, and I don't know whether I said it on the air or not, but Mr. Smith is one of my all-time favorite people. He's one of the people that I go to for consultation and advice, and I can always depend upon him being knowledgeable, logical, non-emotional, non-judgmental. And the thing I admire most is always calm and quiet. And to be honest with you, I get passionate sometimes and have a problem with being low keyed and honest and quiet. So once again, coming to you live from our studio here in North Minneapolis. Some people call it the hood. I love the word the hood, by the way. Some people tell me to stay away from that. Where it's just another blessed day. I was explaining to our guest who's coming to us from Atlanta that we had a little snow here today, and I think it's up to late high 70, 80 degrees down in Atlanta right now. And most of you know that I'm a Southern boy, and I'm used to the Southern weather too. I've survived Minnesota for a few decades, and might be time to do something about that. Uh, our topic in the intro tonight is education. And look, I just have to connect dots. I have to at least put 2 points out there and connect them. I just can't take a simple topic and talk about that. So, what am I going to connect with education? I'm going to get into it shortly here. Then we're going to bring on our guest. Um, Once again, he has a great story, and I always tell you, I have what they call the parts of life, PARTS. The P is for perspective, the A is for attitude, the R is for how we react to things in life. The T is just tenacity, and the S is for spirituality, because at the foundation of it all, I think that has been the key to me dealing with just about any and everything in life. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's start off before we get to education. I have to connect this dot. Last week I told you about it, and some of you thought it was a little small story though, but sometimes small things says a lot. Anyway, went into the local grocery store, Cub Foods, West Broadway, and I'm looking for a little hand basket to shop with because normally I don't do that much shopping. And they tell me they're out of hand baskets. And I'm like, why you out of hand basket? Well, people steal them. Well, you let people steal the hand basket. You got security here. Well, and I talked to the security guy, and he was very nice. He said, look, man, we got people in the bathroom OD in here, and we aren't going to bother them about taking some hand baskets. I'm like, okay, so would you let them walk out here with a pack of a sirloin, something like that? That's stealing. That's shoplifting. And I kind of accepted it. Talked to the manager. I let him know that I would not be shopping there until they get some hand basket. And here's my point: this low expectation in our communities. And I let the manager know. I let the security people know. First of all, people walking out of the store with the baskets is unacceptable. Secondly, the security letting people walk out of the store with the baskets is unacceptable. And then finally, the manager's solution, which I told was unacceptable, is that we just aren't going to have any baskets, was unacceptable, and let them know that. And here's the thing: well, I don't care what it is. I have the same expectation for my family, for my community, as I have for everyone else's family in their community. I don't want to hear about you're poor and life is hard. I don't want to hear that. And I say that because I know that made a difference in my life. That the people that raised me didn't want me to make any excuses for not being the best I can be. And part of being the best I can be was to obey the law and don't steal and things like that. And they grill that into me. And not only that, look, once I had children, my whole life and perspective on life changed. I knew my life wasn't mine anymore. and the things that I was doing that might not be good for my kids or conducive to being a good family man, I knew I had to stop doing. And look, people, and I'm gonna say this to the men out there. Uh, Look, once you start having children, you got to stop breaking the law. I mean, that's not good for your kids, and I don't want no other excuse. So that was my reaction to Cub Food saying we weren't going to have any baskets. It's unacceptable. If I go out to YZ, I expect to find basket in the grocery stores. I expect to find them here. Long story short, all of us got together, the management, the security people. They're going to go out and buy some new baskets, and we're going to have some hand baskets in the Cub Food here in the hood. Now, how does that relate to education? I think one of the main issues in education is that we got low expectation of our children, our community, well, the educational people, the teachers in the public school system have low expectation of our children, of our community. They let us get away with things that they shouldn't let us get away with. And here's the thing, and really, this is about the teacher strike. And I'll wrap this up and get Mr. Smith on here soon. One of my most memorable experiences in the field of education, I got a lot of it. And by the way, I'll say this now: any of you out there in education who want to have a dialogue, especially on the achievement gap, please give me a call, and I will glad to have you on the show and talk about it, because the issue is solvable. It's just inexcusable that we're not solving this. And this is where I'm going to the teacher strike. This 9th grade young lady basically was reading at a 1st grade level. And you don't know how shocked I was. How can you, in any school system, in the 9th grade, only read at the 1st grade level? So that, to me, and I got a lot of Minneapolis public school stories like that. And then I have a grandson. Now, I guess a year and a half, 2 years, he was at home for online learning because of COVID. Now, even though kids have almost a 0%, in fact, I think the data shows the only children that died from COVID were those who had some pre-existing conditions. So even though the children was not that much at risk with it, we shut down the schools and had online learning, which we know was not successful, which means that the achievement gaps that already exist, inner city kids and black kids and people of color are falling farther behind. And then we have this situation where when it comes time to open up, the teacher goes on strike. Now, interesting that the same day the headlines talked about the teachers going on strike, there was a headline talking about the achievement gap among children of students of color is widening, and they got the nerve to go on strike. Look, and I'm trying to make this as quick and succinct as I can. We need to have school choice, and I'm just in favor of even private institution. The money follows the child, and in private business, you just can't go on strike because you lose money. And the issue with the government having a monopoly on education, besides the curriculum, is the fact they don't have to worry about going out of business. They don't have to educate our children. The teachers that's here and the administrators, they're going to get paid whether our children get educated or not. I wanted to bring in there some competition from some people. If they don't educate our children, they go out of business. And that's what I want to see. And I think it's a lot of gumption and arrogance where they're going on strike, picketing in our very neighborhood where they're serving the kids the most. We got the most picketers because the public school system headquarters is located here in North Minneapolis in the hood. They're out there picketing, want more money, haven't educated our children for 2 years. And when they were educating our children, they weren't doing a good job of it. And they have the nerve and the gumption, like I said, coming out of the neighborhood to picket and be on strike. People, let's change this. We have got to have some alternative to our current public school system. And I'm not going to even get into the critical race theory and all that nonsense that they're talking about right now. So that's all I have to say. Teacher strike, they got some nerves to go on strike, given their performance, and they should be educating our children. I don't want to hear any excuses for it, just like I didn't want to hear any excuses from Cub Food for not having those baskets. We can't give ourselves excuses. And that's what I don't like about the current public school system. We always have excuses, class size. Now, one last thing before I go, and bear with me, they are asking for a greater mental health resources, and I can understand that because, and I'm not going to get into all the statistics, but half of the people prison population suffer from dyslexia, and there's a lot of connection between the inability to read or illiteracy in the prison population. So I do understand that there's some mental health issues that's involved in that and reading and stuff, and I'd like to see more resources for that. But the class sizes and stuff, I don't know. I don't have much sympathy for that. And I'll end it with this. And I challenge the public school system. I'm serious about this. Give me those children that you're having a hard time educating. Give me the money. I will educate them. I'm not going to whine and complain about class size, and I know there's studies out there. I'm not going to talk about textbooks and resources and whether we got computers. In fact, and I'm serious in this, give me a piece of chalk and a chalkboard. Give me the kids that you're not educating. Give me the money, and I guarantee you I will educate them. And when I say educate them, I mean when they graduate from high school, they'll be reading at high school level. They'll be doing math at high school level. They'll know civics, they'll know history and everything else. That's what I'm talking about. Oh, and the most important thing, they will have a purpose and goal in life, and they will have a plan for a post-secondary education or some type of way of providing for themselves and their family. So that's my speech. It's been on too long, but these are things I'm passionate about. And it just seems like to me we're accepting a lot of excuse and non-performance, and we're rewarding people for non-performance. And it's up to us in the community to demand more of the public school system, which I think is just, don't even, I'll leave it there before I lose my religion. Okay, having said that, this evening, like I said, a very special guest is someone I respect a lot, Mr. Felton Smith, chemist, former chemist, retired chemist and manager at 3M. Welcome to Bright Lights, Mr. Smith, one of my favorite people. How you doing, sir?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm doing well.
Okay. And we talked about Atlanta down there, where you're at, and the good weather down there, and the culture and everything. We talked a little bit about the fact that I don't think I could have majored in chemistry and some of the challenges there. But let's get started, Mr. Smith. I told him before, and the podcast that we had the technical difficulties. You have one of my all-time favorite stories because it kind of sums up my view in life and obstacles and racism and everything else. And your mom kind of hit it right on the nail on the head, as they say. Tell me this story about, I think you were in high school, Mr. Smith, I think. Were you in high school when this test situation cropped up and they were giving different tests to the different students? Tell me that story and how at the end of the school year you was the teacher's favorite student. Tell me that. And your mom, really, she's the hero of this story as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the story took place not in high school. But then we used to have junior high,
Right.
seventh,
Okay. Right.
ninth grade. And so when I was going into seventh grade, there was integration in North Carolina. Previously, I had gone to an all-black elementary school in that area, and excellent education, by the way, in that school. And so a number of us were pretty sharp students going in when we integrated. And so when we started this journey in integration, one of the courses I was involved in or taking at that time was U.S. history. And so it was in U.S. history class, and in U.S. history class every week you'd have a quiz or a test. And the teacher of our class and teaching us U.S. history was Mrs. Gainey. I'll call her name, and because of the story, Mrs. Gainey was the history teacher, and she told us in the beginning to avoid any student copying off another student or anything. There'd be multiple tests out there, but they would all cover the subject matter. And so I took the first test, first quiz, and I'd always been a good student. And when I got the test, it was really confusing because of the questions on the test. And so the questions on the test were, say, if we were looking at U.S. history, I think that was the course, if George Washington crossed the Delaware, for instance, the question would be in U.S. history, what color was George Washington's socks when he crossed the Delaware? And that was the extent of all my questions on this quiz, about 10 questions. And so didn't know the color of his socks, got that wrong, probably most of the other ones. And so the catch was when we got our test back the next day, we had to take our test home and have them signed by our parents and return to make sure they kept up with our progress. I begrudgingly took my test home and because I had a D on that test, and took it to my mother, a little weary and concerned about what the reaction would be. And sure enough, my mother looks at it and she looks up at me and she says, "What is this?" And I say, "It's my history quiz and you have to sign it." And she was, "But what is this?" I said, "Mother," and before I could get that out, she said, "What is this grade?" And I said, "It's a D." And she said, "You never brought any grades in like this before. You're not even in high school. This is unacceptable. We can't have this." And I was, "But mother, you don't understand. Now, we at integrated schools, and Mom, you need to understand, I talked to the other Black students, we all not getting history questions. We're getting questions that we can't answer studying history." And so she said, "But this is unacceptable." I said, "Mom, you don't understand. Mrs. Gainey is racist. You need to understand this. She's prejudiced. She's not giving us a chance on these tests." And so my mother looked at me and she looked around and she looked up and she looked back and she said, "Is the answer in the book?" I said, "Is the answer in the book?" She said, "Is the answer in the book?" I said, "It's about colors and things like that, and the horse and all of that." She said, "Is the answer in the book? Bring me the book." So I went and got my history book and we sat down and started looking in the book, and there was some photos. Didn't have any figures or dates or events or any of that, but a photo. And there was George Washington standing up in Delaware. You could see right above his boot a sliver of color of a sock. I don't remember the color. And so
Uh-huh.
I said, "Is that answer in the book?" And I said, "Well, Mom, but Miss Gainey," she said, "Don't worry about Mrs. Gainey. You worry about if the answer is in the book, then you need to know it. That's all that's accepted in this house." So I took the book for the next week, studied every fact, every figure, every event, everything, every photo, memorized, because my mother didn't play and it was unacceptable. And so I was number 6 of 9 children, and all of my older siblings excelled in school. So naturally, that's the standard. And so I took the next test and I got all the questions right. And every test from that point forward, I got every question right. If there was anything that was in the book, my mom, I had to learn it. Now, fortunately, I had the capacity to do that and was able to do it. So as time went along, I started getting questions of a difficult nature on progressively on dates and times and figures and events. And so never missed another point in the history class. As we went along, Mrs. Gainey gave me the hardest test of tests. And at the end became her favorite student, so much so that even the white kids were calling me her teacher, the teacher's pet, right? And so it taught me one lesson on perspective. Now, I don't make excuses nor for Mrs. Gainey. Mrs. Gainey had what I call an ignorant notion about Black students. She thought we could not learn dates, facts, but we could learn colors and certain things here and there. And so she was trying to help us pass her course. And so it taught me that where she wasn't really as much racist as she was, had a prejudiced, stereotypical notion about Black students. But once she was taught that Black students not only could learn, but could excel even beyond the white students in the class, she was willing to accept me as her favorite student. And so that's my Mrs. Gainey's story. It taught me perseverance in the face of difficulties. And it also taught me about my capacity to learn. And so much so that I had to learn everything. I'm not saying everyone would have had that type of memory to do that, but the lesson is more about the perseverance in the
Well,
faith.
in the faith part, yes, because I tell people when I left home at 17, I thought I was prepared for the world, and I still do. And a lot of it was dependent upon the knowledge I got of the biblical verses and the teachings of Jesus. And it's the faith that really helps sustain me and lay the foundation for how I react to things and how I look at things. And it also reminds me of the way I was raised. One of my favorite things, my dad always told me, fair is a place where they judge pigs at. And son, I don't want you coming here complaining about whether or not life is fair. You just do your best. And I like the fact that, and by the way, I identify with the fact that you, with the D's that you got. I got one D in K through 12. In fact, in the 9th grade, and I thought I was going to die because I hated D's and C's. I hated C's and B's. But I got it in band. My first quarter test in band, playing the trombone, Mr. Hallberg, he probably ain't out there anymore, but my band director, he had talked me into not playing the saxophone and playing the trombone instead. And so after the first quarter, the test was sight reading a piece of music, and I screwed it up. But I thought he was kind of setting me up, though. But anyway, the long story short, I got a D. And from there, it motivated me to just go home and practice. And it was just a short time where I was first trombone. And I think that's the way you react to things like that. I think the best way to get back at people who don't want you to succeed or who's prejudiced is to succeed. And that's what I always focus on. So I really, really love that story. A lot of times when I'm talking to some of my friends, they don't understand. I've never wasted any time even thinking about racism much myself or white supremacy or whatever they call white privilege. And I figured they didn't have anything over my life, and that didn't make any difference to me. If I just focus on being the best I can be, that's the best way of dealing with that and achieving in life. So that's always been my attitude. So that's why I really love that story. You didn't let it stop you. And I guess besides your mom, the fact that it changed the heart, soul, and mind of your teacher of how not only is that she looked at you, but other Black students. So I love that story there. So let's get going a little bit more. I appreciate that story, Smith, because the first time you told it to me, I just loved it. So let's talk a little bit about where you're from. You originally from North Carolina, I understand. Now, were you from a small southern town like I was? Because there's something about those small southern towns and those elderly people down there, the elders down there. They're the wisest people I've ever met in my life, and I've been in a lot of places where people are educated and everything else, but wisdom is rare. So you're from a small town in North Carolina. Am I not correct?
That's correct. A small town, Stedman, North Carolina, Stdman, and it's about 10 miles outside of Fayetteville, Fort Bragg, North Carolina area.
Oh, okay.
And it's a small rural, at the time, rural farming type community, fairly small. And yeah, I grew up there, with mom and dad and my 8 siblings. And so it was about a 45-acre farm that my mother's father had owned as a farmer. Yeah.
Okay. And I think I recall it was a tobacco farm, right?
Yes, a lot of tobacco, worked in tobacco quite a Tobacco was very instrumental in my life. It was one of the things that motivated me to get out, get an education, get away from those tobacco fields. And I knew that one thing I wasn't going to do was going to be stuck there farming tobacco. And so it motivated me so much so that in high school and everything, I excelled enough that I got a presidential scholarship to a few places, Governor's School in North Carolina, things like that. But the motivation was parents, their trust and faith in God, and also those tobacco fields.
Yeah. Now, we talked briefly about you. What made you decide to major in chemistry, professional chemistry, if I remember correctly, at North Carolina A&T, of all the fields, Mr. Smith?
Well, the thing about it is sometimes life presents opportunities, not necessarily you always have a plan. My plan was to go to college, and I didn't really have the background where I was aware of all the professions out there and the choices. But I had done very well in high school, and I ended up filling out applications in the study hall, and was filling out applications, and the teacher over the study hall asked me, well, Felton, what are you going to study? And I said, I don't really have a good idea. And she said, well, you can always change it, but why don't you study chemistry? And I was like, chemistry? And she said, well, you took chemistry last year under me, and I was taking physics under her then. And she said, you won the chemistry award, so you evidently can do it, and you have a knack for it. And so I put in chemistry and ended up matriculating to North Carolina A&T and through there. And so stayed with chemistry. I went into chemistry and I was doing well. I was a top student in sophomore year, and I thought about changing my major. And because I started liking math, and I minored in mathematics, but I stayed in chemistry mainly because people were dropping out, to tell you the truth. And I was not going to have it said that chemistry beat me. It was a little ego thing. And so I ended up staying in chemistry. I could do it. I did fairly well in it, did internships and all of that. And so professional chemistry, most of the chemistry students were pre-med, where they were actually, pre-med. They were going to go to med school, and they become physicians. And I didn't really have an interest in that. And so they separated the chemistry. The focus was more so in whether it was medical or pre-med or professional, meaning industry at that time. And so I chose the industry route.
Okay. Well, if I remember chemistry correct, and I took one college level course in chemistry, the formulas, Felton, the volume, pressure, and temperature normally wasn't round numbers. And I might have mentioned this to you before. And when I looked at the answer, I'm like, I'm not sure this is the answer. And especially in college, we couldn't use calculators, so we had to use a slide rule. But what were you allowed to use a calculator, or did you use a slide rule? Because those chemistry numbers can get kind of weird on us, and Avogadro's numbers and all those kind of things. How did you perform your chemistry math, Mr. Smith? That sounds kind of challenging to me.
Well, as I stated, I minored in mathematics, so math, just was something I was good at. But we could use calculators, I think, when we in our junior year by that time. But in chemistry, it's not really the math that's the issue. Instead, in chemistry, you need to be decent, pretty good at mathematics. But it's really the idea of the chemical, structures and formulas, and really seeing reactions and so forth. And the math is a minor part of it. Now, when you get into some of the higher courses like quantum mechanics, all of the physical chemistry, the math can be a little rigorous. But still, what you're really trying to learn is the theory and the understanding of chemical reactions and interactions more so than the math itself. The math just helps facilitate the learning process more than anything else.
And North Carolina A&T is an HBCU.
Yes.
And I've seen some videos of the homecomings that they have there. So you guys seem like a pretty tight university. Besides Felton Smith, uh, name some of the probably more well-known alumni of North Carolina A&T, some that I would know.
Yeah, and I don't really get into a
I'm
lot
putting you
of
on the
that.
spot here.
And
I'm putting you
one
on the
reason
spot here.
I can
Uh,
mention a few names, but
mhm,
sometimes that question, just in general,
mhm.
is one, especially at HBCUs, I am cautious in answering. And the reason is North Carolina A&T is the largest historically black college and university now in the country, but it is known mostly for engineering throughout the years. And there are a tremendous number of engineers that have come through there, and some of the more famous people aren't the
Yeah,
heart and
right,
soul of North Carolina A&T.
right. That's
And
a good
the
point.
scientists and the engineers are. And
Right.
of course, Ron McNair came through there, of course, the astronaut. But I won't go beyond that. And everyone knows Jesse Jackson was from there because of the
Yeah,
civil rights background. But there's a
right.
host and a long line of graduates from North Carolina A&T, same as a lot of HBCUs. But the excellence in, especially in my being there, was the STEM of the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics at the school. And it's the number one producer of black engineers in the country, in the world, really. And so I prefer my focus go to those host of engineers and scientists, business professionals, and so forth that came out of the university, rather than a short list or a long list of some of the people that are more famous. And of course, we have actors, well-known actors and entertainers and various folk like that. And not that we're not proud of them, but
Right.
because we're talking about education, I like to keep the focus on the education part of it and the excellence of HBCUs. So
Okay.
hopefully,
Well, I love that answer, and I hope that lets the audience understand why you are one of my favorite people to talk to, because I think that was a very thoughtful answer there. So, uh, you go to North Carolina A&T, you graduate with a professional chemistry degree. Now, Mr. Smith, the fun is over. It's time to go to work, and you're on your own. You're going to have to be buying houses and paying bills and things like that. And before you do all that, you got to get a job. So, explain to me about your choice and decision to start your work and career at 3M.
well, it goes back to being at North Carolina A&T. I actually did three internships, summer internships with 3M while a student at North Carolina A&T. I was one of the first students that was a rising junior. Usually they had rising seniors in their program to be allowed into the summer technical program because of the endorsement of our chairman of our department, who was quite a impressive scientist in his own, and ended up president of Delaware State University years ago. And
Mhm.
he visited 3M, and 3M was so impressed by him that it initiated our internship program with 3M. Uh, and so also the engineering department had a co-op with 3M, but the chemistry department did not at that time. And so myself and another Minnesotan there, Michael Stevens, you may have met Mike, were the first two chemistry interns from A&T ever at 3M. And so in doing those three internships, you do a good job the first time. You're usually invited back until you graduate. And so before I graduated back then, uh, companies sort of pretty much offered you a position without offering it to you. So I knew I had the job there when I decided to start my professional career.
So you go into your first corporate scene. I guess you had interns. Were there any hesitation, concerns, or trepidation walking into a corporate environment? And I asked that uh, in terms of I was in engineering, as you know, and I'd have engineers, young college graduate engineers, come and join our company, and because I've always been halfway confident and stuff, but I was just they were very hesitant, and there was some trepidation about the corporate culture and the corporate world, and I tried to mentor them. What did you have any trepidation or anything, or any concerns, or were there any major issues that you came across as you entered into your corporate career?
Yeah, I guess by the time I started my career, there was no trepidation at that point because I was familiar
Right.
with the company. I had done 3 internships, 2 of which were in the department that I ended up accepting a job. And so I knew some of the people, all of that. There were challenges, yes. You're coming in, and why I chose 3M over some of the other places that at the time, I had decided I was not going to go forward and get my PhD in chemistry. And most chemists should do that. And I went into their corporate research laboratories, which was heavily PhD related. And so, but I chose 3M because during that time, you could come in even with a bachelor's or a master's. And if you had the job, you had the job, you were accepted there as a professional. You didn't have, like in some companies, a PhD over you. You were a chemist in your own right, and you had to carry your own water, so to speak, and learn the culture of the company and contribute on, at the same level as everyone else. And you could progress up. And so that's why I chose 3M. And so there were some challenges just competing against all of those PhDs. And also, there were a few things that during the time, because of the time, some people, wanted to question your work, but, overcame that. That didn't last for very long. So,
Well, the other question, and it just came to my mind, to be honest with you, is that there's always, for me at least, I should say always, I should just speak for myself, there's the transition from the theoretical classroom stuff to the real world work you have to do. And I say that from the standpoint of I graduated with computer programming, uh, AA from Brown University. I studied high level languages. In my first software engineering job that I begged for, and I shouldn't say beg, I don't beg. I bugged my manager about, and he finally gave it to me unexpected last minute through a listening at me and said, "Here you go." Long story short, uh, I got this listing of assembly language for an 8080 Intel microprocessor, and I didn't have a clue of what's going on. I mean, I'm used to print statements and stuff, but it doesn't work like that in assembly language. And I just remember a guy say, "Yeah, the problem's in the interrupt trap." I didn't have a clue of what this guy was talking about, but I quickly learned, and I've told this story before. I said to myself, for the first 6 months, people are going to be wondering how in the heck I got this job. But once again, about perspective, attitude, reaction, tenacity, and spirituality, uh, I'm like, in 6 months, I'm going to be the best in the world at this. And I know, by the way, and I didn't mention this before, uh, when the guys told me, Dave Sadman, I have never forget him, he's a great guy, mentor. He's the one that said, "Oh yeah, the problem's in an interrupt trap." And right after that, he said, "Piece of cake." And that's told me, because I've always been, if somebody else can learn as a piece of cake to them, I'm gonna make it a piece of cake to me. Number one, and then number two, I'm saying, okay, God is sending an angel this way to guide me through this, and so that's the spiritual part of it. But this is all to give a background for your response of the theoretical classroom stuff and the type of things you ran into when you first entered the real world of work. Is there anything memorable in that area for you, Mr. Smith?
Not from the theoretical, because excuse me,
Hmm.
because the chemistry labs at A&T really prepared you for
I
working
guess
in a
that's true.
laboratory environment, and,
Right.
and they were quite long and challenging. So, and with the internships, I thought I was well armed going in from a
That's a good
practical.
point.
It's important, I think, when you're in those fields, to take advantage of internships and so forth and so on, because then you make the connection between the theoretical, the labs, and then the labs are good, but then at the bottom line, when you go into industry or working for someone, is profits at the end of the day, new products, how you contribute to the bottom line, so to speak. And although
Hmm.
you're a scientist and you're sort of insulated from some of that if you're in the corporate main laboratories, but at the end of the day, your worth is what you're bringing and contributing to the company. And the key, you mentioned one word, is having good mentors and also people who have an interest in you succeeding.
Yeah.
And spiritually so, God puts people in your life, no matter what situation, to help you through that. And the worst thing you can do is be afraid to let some things, no, there are things you don't know. And because that's important, because you can create a situation when you can't fake it when you're talking about science.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's what I
So
like about our field.
it's,
You can't fake
it's
it.
best to learn what you need to know,
Right.
even if someone thinks you should already know it, and build that foundation, because that will kick off the things you can do. And
Right. Right.
if you don't do that, you can't have a fear, because that's what science is about, discovery,
Right.
and a large portion of it. And you'd be surprised how much a lot of people don't know, because we're doing research, and they don't call it search, they call it research.
Research. Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
The answers aren't always there. And so you
Right.
have to take that approach to, don't be afraid, like I said, to not know something. Find out where you can learn it or be mentored on it. And that's the key more so than anything. It's better to take those lumps early
Right. Right.
than ruin your
So
career.
So you mentioned labs. I should point out we had computer programming labs at Brown. Didn't do me any good when I got there. But that's a good point that you make. Now you move to Minnesota. You start your career. You start your career at 3M, and somewhere down the line, you met a young lady. You fell in love. You got married, I think, and had a family. We're going to talk about your family as it evolved early, but tell me about your finding the love of your life and raising a family here in Minnesota and being a dad and a husband and that experience.
Yeah, and my wife, who, as you know, and I can get into that later, is I'm widowed now. But my wife, Yvonne Sloan, and she was a North Minneapolis product. And so she lived over, I even remember I used to drive over Vincent and 24 over in
Mm-hmm.
North Minneapolis. I met her actually, I thought I met her out one evening at an establishment. But what I didn't know when I approached her, I thought I had a pretty smooth line, being a Kappa brother, and coming in and talking with her. But she already knew who I was, and didn't let me know that when I acquired her number. But fortunately, I had a reputation in the city of being a decent enough person that one of her friends had planned on introducing us. And so I met her, and it was a funny story. I thought I just swept her off her feet, but she already knew the background on me and everything. And so we started dating and ended up married and having three children. My two girls and a boy. My oldest daughter Ayana, and a younger daughter Elon, and my son, Felton Lewis, and building a nice, what I thought was a pretty good, happy family. Can't say we were all totally a model family, but kind of like that in my mind. And it was
Mm-hmm.
pretty happy. And unfortunately, down the line, my wife was diagnosed with cancer, and it was a rare form, and had pretty much progressed by the time we discovered it. And so I never say she lost her battle with cancer because she didn't lose. She won every step of the way on that battle, but did physically succumb. And but yeah, that created quite a ripple, uh, probably not just in my life, of course, but definitely in our children's life.
Yeah, and you mentioned Kappa, and we are fraternity brothers, and
I have.
yeah,
Hopefully,
that
you
was
hear that.
yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was very painful for us all. But what I want the audience to know is how you uh, made it through that situation, and what I admire you for being a single dad all these years and raising your three children. And I just really admire that about you and the sacrifice that you made for your children. And I'm going to repeat to all the parents out there, especially the fathers, you have got to sacrifice for your children. And once you have children, they should be the number one priority, I think, in every decision you make. And if you aren't doing that, you aren't doing your children right. But you made the choice to raise your children. I think you never remarried again. Tell me about that experience and what are your three children doing nowadays, Mr. Smith?
Well, first I'll mention how I did it. There were times that I didn't know how you come through on that, but and not realizing the grief you're going through yourself as you're taking on this responsibility. First thing was, if someone asked me why I raised my children, it's because that was my responsibility and my job. There was no other option in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I could have, their grandparents, my siblings, uncles, aunts, whatever, would happily have stepped in. But it was my responsibility. I was their father, and my responsibility for them. My children were 15, 13, the girls, and my son was 7 when their mother passed away. And so it was a difficult time. It was faith in God. It was family, friends, community that gives you the inspiration, courage, and support to do these things. But more importantly, my children, they were a blessing, never gave me a moment of problems or issues during this process. And so, as difficult as it was for them, they were my inspiration through the whole thing. I told my son, very briefly, my mother passed away at the age of 90 in 2020, January 3rd, 2020. My son flew in from New York. He was in college then. And I picked him up the day we were going over for the first time to view my mother. And it made me recall the first time I took the children in the same situation with their mother. And I told my son as I left the hotel, and I was feeling really low. And I looked over at my son and I said, "Son, I need to go over here to this funeral home and be the man you were at 7." And because I had my mother there for everything all my life. So my children, I'm extremely proud of them and what they've done and what they have become. My oldest daughter is an attorney here in Atlanta. My younger daughter is a manager in the health consulting business. They both are doing extremely well. My son just finished up at NYU, New York University, and is looking right now to go out and make his mark in life as well. So.
Wow, great job there. Now you also mentioned our fraternity. You're at North Carolina A&T, and you decide to join. And there's a whole history of Black fraternities and sororities out there that we might spend some time talking about one day. But you decided to join Kappa Alpha Psi. What went into that decision? And by the way, before you answer that, I want our audience to know this, that I know his closeness with his line brothers and things even today, and I see it. But what went into your decision to join a fraternity, and specifically the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity?
Yes, when I started college, I had older siblings, and only two of my sisters had joined a sorority, and so I knew a little bit about Greek life, but not much. And when I started, I had no plans of joining a fraternity, no particular interest. And as I went along, started checking out fraternities on the yard, so to speak. And uh, I had chemistry labs, as I mentioned, and my lab partner was pledging Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity at the Alpha Nu chapter there at North Carolina A&T. And I always made sure that I tried to carry the load in the labs a little more because I knew he had a lot of balls in the air with pledging, and he's a biology major and doing very well, and he was an upperclassman. And so I just started watching him after he was initiated into fraternity, and started checking out the guys and noticing how they carried themselves, the things they were about. Weren't rowdy at all, were gentlemen, very distinguished on campus, had campus position and so forth and so on. And so I started learning about the fraternity and the things they were doing, community service that was going on, and also their guide right programs at that university, was geared towards tutorials and things like that. We did, even when I joined, became an initiate, while we were pledging, we had to carry out certain community projects and so forth and so on. And so just was impressed by Kappa Psi in particular because it was founded, the only, I think, historically Black Greek organization, Black Greek organization that was founded on a majority white campus, Indiana University. And it was founded for the very purpose of helping the students excel and achieve their goals and excellence in an environment that wasn't quite conducive for or friendly for Black students at that time. And so I was just so impressed with the history of the organization and the things that were actually being done. And so much so, I'm a life member. I am active, local chapter here. We have a tremendous Kappa League program. That's where young Black males in particular, but it's open to any background, but it's mostly young Black males, are taught leadership and as a young age. And the chapter I'm in has a very small, a lower level youth group, a high school level group, and it's just tremendous the things they do. Even teaching some of the young kids to do an interview like you're doing, programs like that. And I only mention, and I don't want to go too much about the chapter I'm in now, but my understanding is, before I joined more recent, that they also try and target especially single parents with young males to help them with that journey of development of young men.
Wow. And I have never told this story publicly or probably to anybody, but I was like you. I had no intentions or no interest in fraternities at the University of Minnesota, and it just so happened, I'll give a quick word, ex-Vietnam veteran, Noah Shelton, I don't know where Noah is now, he recruited me, and I just admired him and the way he carried himself. somewhat differently than most of the people on campus. And he saw I was like a studious guy. Every time he saw me at lunch, I was reading a book or something. So he kind of picked up on that and recruited me. So that's how you and I became fraternity brothers, Felton, reluctantly, but basically very grateful for it. Uh, so you also is very, very loyal and thankful and gracious to North Carolina A&T. And I understand the only experience I got with most experience I got with an HBCU, I grew up 40 miles from Alcorn State University, and we used to play in their homecoming every year. So I got a little feel of the campus life and the Greek life up there. But I understand you've also created some type of endowment or something at North Carolina A&T, and you're just checking off all the points of a purposeful life here, Mr. Smith. Tell us about your endowment fund or whatever you have set up, scholarship fund at North Carolina A&T.
Yeah, well, first I say I think there's an obligation, and also I put a challenge out there when I finish for those of us who benefited from education, especially at a historically Black college and university, because it's a very unique experience. I had no intentions of going to an HBCU when I came out of high school initially. All my life, I had planned to go to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I had been accepted there. I had a full scholarship there, all those things. And an incident happened in high school. And it was, I was a little, at that time I was young, and I was in line to be the first Black valedictorian of my high school. There was a little funny business went on, and some things happened that were not fair. And so I won't go into that because that's not that important. Because someone told me to check out North Carolina A&T because I was a little frustrated at that time about a situation being manipulated around me, something I had earned and worked for all my life, I felt was taken from me. And so they said, well, check it out. And so I went and checked out North Carolina A&T and ended up making the decision to go there. And it was one of the best decisions in my life. It just amazed me. For one, I thought that up to that point, I'll be honest, like a lot of people thought that maybe it was a step down education-wise, be a big fish in a little pond. Well, back then, years ago, they used to rank engineering students in this country. A lot of people don't know that. And two of the top 10 ranked engineering perspectives coming out of college, not just Black, top 10, two of them were at North Carolina A&T. And blew me away. I had gone to Governor School of North Carolina, which is supposed to have been the brightest and our best. So I'm walking around campus and I feel like, oh yeah, I'm this and that. I start running into these other guys that are going, I'm like, wait a minute. And these two engineers that were well known, they were so brilliant, perfect scores through college. They were teaching courses their senior year. And so I got exposed to the academic piece of it people didn't know. So anyway, in this whole process, it helped me to learn that we that have gone there need to promote colleges and universities like that. I did an endowment, and and it's the smallest level because the endowments at HBCUs are much less. And as we increased the endowments there, we're able to provide more money for more students, deserving students to come in. And it's not a tiny school. It's already, 13,000 students, North Carolina A&T. And so my endowment is there to give back a little bit. I have a scholarship set up. Its focus is in the science and technology area. And also it's for any level, not just incoming student, just to make sure if someone has a difficulty along their way, that may qualify for it, they will not have to drop out of school. So that's why I made it a little bit more flexible. If you want some time, you can actually give to my endowment.
Yes, please. I was going to ask you, share with our audience,
In
Mr.
my name.
Smith, how they could send money to your endowment fund. How can we invest in the future of our children? Since a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Uh,
It's easy to do. It's through the university giving office, university giving. And
can they go
just
online and find that, Smith? By the way, before you go, can they go online and find that? How to donate?
they can
Okay,
find
go ahead.
that online. I would suggest that they might want to speak with someone there,
Okay, call. Okay,
but it can be done online. And
okay,
the scholarship is under my name.
okay, okay. Gotcha.
The
Felton
endowment.
Smith.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
and so and I can pass that along to you. But the thing I wanted to challenge everyone, and especially black professionals or just our community in general, that no matter what university you attended, I think it's important to give to the historically black colleges and universities because the majority of the students are are African American. But don't be fooled. A lot of foreign OUS students that have come in, a number of white students, because the school is excellent. They study engineering there in particular, and also a lot of white students in our sports program. So, so it's a university that is diverse to some degree, although it is historically black predominant, and it's an enriching experience. But I think if we should be obligated to give back because these universities have lower endowments and a greater risk for not going forward. So for the education of those that maybe not as fortunate, in particular to have scholarships at that university, I think it's great. And also the culture of being in what is a more, for some students, a less intimidating environment, to be
Right,
straightforward
right,
about
right.
that. And I've known people, one of my line brothers who's a God rest his soul, Reggie Simmons, who's a well-known attorney before he passed. When he came into North Carolina A&T, he used to tell me he had no thought that he could ever be an attorney. And as he sat around and talked to other students, he was studying recreation at the time. And he was a group of students when we were talking about going to law school, potentially. And he said, I wish I could go to law school. And we sat him down and it was like, then go. And it was just that he tells the story about he never realized he could do that until amongst his peers. They saw he could do it. And he ended up, a pretty successful law career. He was even James Brown's attorney for a long time and all that kind of, yeah. He did very well in a lot of different fields in law.
I love that story also, Mr. Smith. So we know you're very busy, get your own. And what I love about that story is, and one of the purpose of our podcast, and I'm often thinking about our young people, and especially our black young people, because most of the time when a story about black people are in the news, the subject is racism. And I just have a pet peeve with that, and a serious pet peeve with that. They're not talking about our achievement, our overcoming. They're not even talking about how, for the most part, we get along. I don't know about you. I got all kinds of friends and acquaintances, and we all get along. But for some reason, the media tend to just want to focus on racism, and I think I know why. But this is what I'm saying. Our show here is like to do the same thing for our young people that you did for Mr. Simmons, right? Is to give us some encouragement. And I just believe that people can be anything they set their minds to do within a certain reason, any purpose they want in life, they can achieve it. And we're here to help them. And so, what I want to do here, one of the things I want to do is overcome all the talk they hear about the negatives in life and the obstacles and why they can't can be what they want to be, and why this country is bad, and what happened to us 200 years ago. And I'm just one of those people against that. And we have another frat brother. You remember Charles Ellis? And I just remember once I was talking to him, and we were talking about something, and it just never got. He said, "Lacy, look, if you believe you can, you're right. If you believe you can't, you're right." And once he said that, a light went off, and he's right. And I tell that to our young people. So I'm here to tell all of our young people, forget all the garbage that you're hearing out there. You can be whatever you want to be. And if you don't think you can, contact me and I'll tell you how you can do it. And stop listening to all these people who are always talking to you about how unfair life is and all the obstacles and what happened to you 200 years ago. A person who's constantly putting that in your ear is not a friend. But you needed someone to say, hey, let's sit down and figure out a purpose in life, a goal in life, and let's go out and do it. And I'm going to end it with this. One of the reasons I admire this young man here, and he's one of my favorite people, is that, as you can see, he have achieved quite a bit as a student, as a father, as a son, as a family man, as a widower raising his children. And he overcame all the obstacles that they put in his way. And he went on to become a professional chemist, manager at 3M, and retired. And I think he's living fairly comfortable. Got 3 children out there in the world, college educated, and doing a good, leading a good life. So I think you are what all of us can be if we just have the right people saying the right things to us and encouraging us. And that's what we're here on Bright Lights to do, is bring achievers like you, Mr. Smith, on the air and let you share your stories and let it know it can be done. So once again, I really appreciate you being on again after we had some technical difficulties with your earlier interview. And I hope to see you in Atlanta sometime this year. And as I told you before we went on the air, I don't eat shrimp and grits a lot, but there's one little restaurant in some hotel down in Atlanta where my auntie talked me into going there for some shrimp and grits, and they're the best I ever had. So we're going to find that place when I come to Atlanta. We're going to go out and have some shrimp and grits. Look forward to you coming back here to Minnesota, and keep up the good work, man. And audience, support his scholarship fund at North Carolina A&T. Is under the name of Felton Smith. And as far as I'm concerned, go out to LacyJohnson.com, subscribe, click the bell for notification, visit our online store, and let us hear from you. And if you think we're not being fair or totally truthful, if you want to correct us, let us know. And my last point is to you educators out there who's not educating our children, come on and tell me why you're not able to educate our children. And I'm saying to you, this is not hard. It's not as hard as you guys are making it. And I'm going to tell you how to do it. I don't care how many PhDs you got in education, how many years of experience. I'm going to tell you how to get it done. So, Mr. Smith, once again, thanks a lot for coming on. Hope to see you soon, and keep up the great work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right.